Yeah, I really hope that Saints Row would absolutely come back and be much better than Agents of Mayhem or Saints Row 4 or Saints Row Got Out of Hell, Saints Row 2022. And to be honest, I much preferred Saints Row the Third and Saints Row 2 and Saints Row 1. But the Saints Row 2022 or the Saints Row reboot was just awful. Like, what kind of game goes and gets set in the Midwest? I don't do desert dwelling games unless if it pertains to Prince of Persia or some Egyptian game. I mean, I'm not into the whole Egyptian mythos, and I'm not into the whole desert dwelling thing or whatever. Got enough of that shit when I was playing that tedious, boring, contrived, and irritating, annoying, and tiresome Ghost Recon Wildlands. Why couldn't Ubisoft just have the very same concept, but taking place in either Japan or in modern day Norway? Or, this may be a long stretch, but modern day Greece that doesn't look at all like the 21st century variation of what we look like in America, that it's still stuck in 420,000 BCE in ancient Greece. Back when, the ancient gods were milling around with the mortals and sure enough, having them being often just milling around on the very flesh of Gaia, and basically having demigod children. But that's besides the point. The point is having Ghost Recon taken place in either, not Egypt, either Norway, Japan, or Greece. stopping gangs and terrorist organizations from running amok. And I'm just saying, I don't particularly am not interested in Saints Row 2022 anymore. There was one good thing about that. The modesty thing. The top modesty thing was a breath of fresh air. And deciding to give your character nipples or just remove the nipples entirely. That is what was the breath of fresh air, because I was sick and tired of the pixelations of Saints Row 2 and Saints Row the 3rd and Saints Row 4. But that was just awful. But having the protagonist be gender neutral, or not have a male or female options, that was a big downgrade. The story was garbage. The hack writing was awful. But much to my dismay, that was the last and final awful-ass game that Volition ever made, and led to its downfall. And yet, THQ gone bankrupt and died years prior to Saints Row 4 and Saints Row Got Out of Hell, Saints Row 4, Saints Row the Reboot, Agents of Mayhem. THQ worked with Volition on the vast majority of the Red Faction games, and the very Saints Row 1, 2, and 3. And the third Saints Row game did not keep them in business, but yet Volition was living on borrowed time. They was living on borrowed time. They ain't been needing a new idea or new approach to gaming. They were clamoring on to both Red Faction and Saints Row. Though Saints Row would have been able to been a very, very long-standing franchise. It would have been enough to rival that of some of the biggest video games at the time. I mean, chances are a lot of people would have loved to have said Saints Row 5 they hadn't have screwed up so badly. Volition screwed the pooch. Nay, Volition and Deep Silver molested the pooch on this one with Saints Row 2022. Basically assaulted the pooch on that one, releasing a buggy game in the year 2022 with a shitty game, a shitty reboot that was not at all what the people who backed Volition for years, since they were like backing the very developing studio for years, since the first ever game that Volition ever made, since being a startup back in the 90s. They did the first Red Faction game, and it was an FPS Red Faction game. Then Red Faction Guerrilla comes out, and it's a third-person game. But Volition's damn choices to make wacky-ass games, instead of being grounded in seriousness, I mean, chances are is that the very Saints Row game that we have in 2022 was going to be the death of Volition. It was another Agents of Mayhem situation. And I feel like Volition is now known for hack writing. Basically Ed Boon and all the OG writers and all of the OGs at the very top of Volition had left Volition after Saints Row 2008. And even more was leaving in droves back in 2011. Barely any of the old guard stuck around during the development of Saints Row 4. And when they were developing Agents of Mayhem and Saints Row Got Out of Hell and Saints Row 2022, aka Saints Row the Reboot, those games, a lot of hardcore, and I mean hardcore Saints Row fans started trashing on them all over social media, lambasting them, and they were widely panned and criticized and becoming a so polarizing company. And then that company closed its doors because of the poor sales and poor reviews, poor feedback, poor user interest. And we all know how Saints Row would have been the best game ever if they just stuck to their guns about having to go and end up having like a lot, I mean a lot of of like a whole bit and a whole lot of success with having Saints Row 5 be the next game. But from rumors I've heard, is Saints Row 77 is being pitched and could be a thing in the future. Here's hoping that the OG, the original developing head writer or something of the original Saints Row 1 game could bring back OG fans. And chances are, a lot of people end up having a lot of like other Saints Row titles. And here's the thing. Saints Row could have been the greatest game franchise. But no! They didn't want to shoot the gun on green lighting Saints Row 5. And with Saints Row 5, that could have had Saints Row iconography being, more prevalent in the game. And the whole merch sales of Saints Row 2 and Saints Row the Third, that didn't help much. It didn't make them much money. It was such a niche game that got just a little bit popular. Just enough to have NSFW content of the game characters being made. And various locations in the game. But barely any characters are popular. Face it. It's no more popular than that of like the first Sims game. It's about as popular as those wrestling games such as the WWE, SmackDown vs. Raw, and those WWF video games. And chances are things haven't been working out for Volition as of late in 2022, which was a short while ago. Though Volition was lambasted, panned, and became widely polarized, and then demoralized, galvanized, and became one of the gaming industry's most hated Western pariah amongst the very basic community of gamers that had so hoped for a fifth Saints Row game. But with Saints Row 77, that might be a possibility. I don't know. But the Fates know. They know everything. Zeus knows, and Zeus knows everything. Athena knows, and Athena knows everything. And I'm just saying, Saints Row could have been a big, massive, colossal hit. And who knows? Who knows? If Volition would have stuck around instead of going bankrupt and going under, they could have bought the whole entirety of, or buy the rights to Sleeping Dogs, buying the rights of the True Crime series, and expanding on existing ideas, on existing ideas. And that's what we could have had. We could have had Saints Row, like a game that is crossed between Saints Row and True Crime series, where you go from being a low-red gangbanger in the Saints and like some like Saints lieutenants, and like if Saints Row 6 would have ever been made. And that's a pipe dream at this point in this very time. And with that, you go from being a low-red gangbanger that had the Boss, Johnny, Pierce, Sean D, Oleg, Angel De La Morte, Zemos, Kinsey, all arrested. And the new up-and-coming lieutenants to take their place would have betrayed you. And then working with the Steelport police, then working with the Stillwater police to finally have Saints Row 6 be the last and final game that did the game justice by putting you in the shoes, in the perspective of a betrayed gang member that is a showboating, like a mixture of Marcus and Nicholas Kang Wilson, but with the Saints Row flavor and the very ghost and the very spirit and the very embodiment of Saints Row. But instead of 3 homies, you'd have 5 of them. And there'd be like the first half, of Saints Row 6 taps into what happened in Saints Row 5, where one by one or in droves the Saints fall apart or starts to fall apart permanently in Saints Row 5 and starts a steady and rapid decline in the 5th game. And in the 6th game, the only one who's responsible for the downfall of the Saints and the very individual that was the very two individuals that was in the Saints that had been forced to turn on the Saints, thusly turn on the new protagonist, and then the previous protagonist from all the Saints Row games, a proper Saints Row 4 being made where it's not dealing with a Zin, is still in the gang aspect. And integrating the Nuwali, the Los Panteros, the idols, integrate them and introduce them properly like the old school Saints Row 1 and Saints Row 2 gangs. And thusly, with the Saints taking over 3 cities, and then bam, they go to another city and take the map size of New Hades and just have, like, instead of like calling it New Hades, take the map of New Hades, and instead of going with the underworld and brimstone theme, it's a gang theme where the last gangs gets taken down in the very prologue at the end of Saints Row 5 and in the early beginning prologue and intro of Saints Row 6. The Saints turn on the new player character, and then the player character who doesn't know the original Saints, all of them that had been
new notification.
Been that of which
For details.
Which in turns with the Saints turning their back on you, and with that being said, the very Saints that you were a member of and working your way up through the ranks, midway, the Saints turn on you. And the only ones that were there was was the ones that were unlockable homies who started it all. Started the betrayal of the Saints and the permanent downfall of the gang. Then with the Saints as your enemy, you start working with the police to wipe out the Saints for good. And without anyone powerful enough member to stand against you in the Saints, you easily take down your former brotherhood. And taking some like dialogue tips from Mass Effect, and instead of it being hyper realistic, like sort of hyper realistic, like it's usually, it goes like a mixture of Overwatch and The Walking Dead and Life is Strange. And depending on the gender of the new player character, has like 5 voices to choose from. 5 male voices and 5 female voices. Having Charlotte Chung be female voice 1, having the voice actress of Tifa Lockhart being female voice 2, having the voice actress of Faith Connors be female voice 3, having the female voice actress of Ellie Williams as female voice 4, and having the voice actress Heather Hogan Watson as the voice of Kokoro be the female voice 5. And having the very man himself, Constantine, Ted, Neo, John Wick, you guessed it, having the GOAT himself, Keanu motherfucking Reeves, one of the biggest stars in the fucking world, be doing male voice 1. And having the second biggest GOAT in all of Hollywood, John Cena, as male voice 2. And just for the fuck of it, why not just throw Will Smith's name into it as male voice 3. And having the very original voice of Raiden from Mortal fucking Kombat. The voice actor voice acting as male voice 4. And having one of my favorite of all time, that 70s show actors, Ashton motherfucking Kutcher as male voice 5 for the new customizable player character. And finally disclosing the real name of the previous customizable character. And having the original player character be just a man, or have like a couple original player characters, the male version and the female version from Saints Row the Third and Saints Row 2. The same character. Having the male version be arrested and having the female version in hiding, waiting to come back, and finally finishing off all those outsiders that they were helping in Saints Row 1 and in Saints Row 2. Having all those outsiders that Julius called friends, other than Legally, because Legally was always on the side of the Saints, and having Legally as the only ally that was an outsider of the Saints that was helping out the Saints the entire time. And a pseudo member of the Saints named Marvin, or not Marvin but Samson, ending up joining in and rebuilding the Saints with the original female version of the boss taking back over for their brother, the male version of the same protagonist from Saints Row 1 and Saints Row 2 and Saints Row the Third, being still locked up, having Jenny, having not Shawnee, but Viola, having Wong, having Ned, having them along with the Genki girls and Professor Genki face the piper of their actions of selling out the Saints, getting them arrested. And once the Saints are wiped out, like 2/3 way, almost to 5/3 or halfway through the game, which would take 5/5 the way through, you go back to joining back with the Saints once more when new gangs arrive and take over all 3 cities. Santo Ileso, Steelport, and Stillwater. And let's call the rebranded and rethemed New Hades, let's call it, I gotta think, let's call it, Fall Hills, which is which is which Saints Row would have had a great time in the fourth city. Where the Saints rebuild, regrouped, start building up reinforcements, and then 4/5 way through the game, the new player character gets sent to all 4 cities, laying siege to new gangs, taking back all 4 cities in one foul swoop. In one foul swoop. In one foul swoop. The Saints are dominant once more. And then the 5/5, you are betrayed again by the second original boss. Again. And then a showdown. The Saints fall apart for good. The female version of the boss is dead. The male version of the boss is still in prison with all of the original Saints that you come to know and love is basically still in prison and legally gets disbarred from the law. And to tie up loose ends, Will and Helmers shows up. Then the new player character shoots both of them. Immediately killing both of the original pimps, Saints pimps from Saints Row 1 and Saints Row 2. To be finally killed off, tying up loose ends. And then the game ends with a free roam. All 5 cities are devoid of gangbangers. And just like The Sims, you could pretty much conversate with anybody and make lifelong friendships during the free roam. And you get a normal job. And finally heading back home to Steelport and seeing that this that schools and a graveyard and colleges and universities and summer camps start popping up rapidly during the free roam. Then you can start a family, taking tips from Bully with a school aspect. But with the rated M rating of Life is Strange. And then you start having grandkids. Once your kid gets old enough to start a family of his or her own. Depends on which gender of the child you choose. And then that child, during when that child is like little, you jump from the new player character to the gender customizable child of the new player character. And then you play as that child all throughout life, and you ask, depending on which version of the character you have played as all throughout Saints Row 5, is the mother or the father, depending on which version you want to go with. But the spouse is different. Male for a female, female for a male. But that's what would have happened if Volition just stuck to their guns and gave fans what they really wanted. It would have led up to Saints Row 6 being a colossal hit. A big, massive hit. That warrants a Saints Row movie. And then a bunch of Saints Row action figures. And that's kind of what could have happened if Volition didn't go bankrupt and close their studio down and did not go with what Deep Silver wanted. But anyways, that's my commentary on the very game.